ICQ Podcast episode 246, FT8 and Essex Hams. Well, hello fellow amateur ham radio enthusiasts and welcome to this our 246th episode of the ICQ Amateur Ham Radio Podcast, supported by Ian Tickle, Golf for Zulu Juliet Hotel, an anonymous donor and our monthly and annual subscription donors. In this episode, Martin M1MRB, W9ICQ, is joined by Leslie Golf 0 Charlie India Bravo, Matthew Mike 0 November Juliet X-Ray, and Chris Mike 0 Tango Charlie Hotel to discuss the latest amateur ham radio news. Myself, Colin M6BOY, rounds up the news in brief, and this episode's feature is a two-part feature. Firstly, in covering the new FT8 mode, and also our feature with the Essex Hams. Well, as always, it's our donors that keep us advert-free for the podcast show, and we'd like to thank you for your continued support, and particularly the support of Ian Tickle, who sent us a one-off donation. Ian says, congratulations on your 9th anniversary. Your podcast is great to listen to whilst driving between jobs. Here's to many more years. 73 from Ian, Golf for Zulu Juliet Hotel. And we also received an anonymous one-off donor as well. Those donors, along with our monthly and annual subscription donors, as they keep paying our subscription fees for our hosting, etc., and keeps the podcast show advert-free. So we would generally like to thank everybody who helps us out. As always, you can do your part by visiting www.icqpodcast.com/donate, where anything you can send our way is always greatly appreciated. Now we join Martin, Leslie, Matthew and Chris as they discuss the latest amateur ham radio news, including ham radio growth in Cuba and shipping returns to radio navigation. Hope you enjoy.
Well, hi guys, and welcome to episode 246 of the ICQ News Roundtable. Tonight I'm joined by Mr. Leslie Butterfield G0CIB.
Good evening, Martin. Great to be here as always.
I'm glad you're great to be here because you weren't done too well last week.
I've got my disability thing, but I'm croaked at the moment. But I do have a cup of tea and some nice biscuits, so that'd be fine. Yeah, well, I'm all good.
So at least we got some positivity with a cup of tea and biscuits. Yeah, that's good. Good to hear you're up and about, though. I have Mr. Matthew Nassau, M0NJX. I'm glad to not have you travelling all over Europe, Matt, and back with us.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for again extending the invitation. It's been a long time since I've had my chance to join you guys, so I'm really pleased to be here.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. And tonight we also have Mr. Chris Howard, M0TCH or N4CTH. Getting it right this time, Chris.
Yeah, good evening. Nice to be here again, chaps. Nice to be on the podcast again. Great, good stuff.
That's good. Unfortunately, Bill Barnes, N3JIX, couldn't make it today due to family commitments. He's got something else on today. And same with Edmund Spicer. Edmund I saw at the weekend, and he said, no, I just can't make it. So, unfortunately, sometimes there are days when we can't make it, but both of them are keeping well, so that's a good one. Moving down to our first news story, this one was about Cuba. Ham radio exams confirm growth in Cuba, and it looks like 312 people applied for a license and 283 got it. So, Leslie, what do you think?
A big grin on my face. I like it. I know what Cuba's like with their cars. They build things and make do with what they got. They are masters at that for various reasons. But if they can do the same with amateur radio, we have a tendency to buy stuff off the shelf here. But this is a positive thing, and I really, really do wish them well. And it's going to be great to hear Cuba on the air because I've never worked them.
No, me neither. So what are you thinking of? You're thinking that people will be repairing FT101s?
No, like I said, they make do with what they've got. They are great at putting things together from all sorts of bits and pieces. So good on them. Yeah. Good on them. This is a good story.
Yeah, I'm pleased. I'm pleased to see lots of people now getting excited. I mean, it's going to make it a lot easier now that the US has not got sanctions against them. So, I think it's a good one. So, Chris, on your part, what do you think?
No, again, it sounds like it's growing over there, which is good news. We've got more people coming into the hobby, which is always great. We might say I've never worked Cuba either, so I don't think I have. So it'd be great to actually work somebody in that part of the world. The nearest I've ever been to Cuba was Miami, where it's quite a big Cuban community and lots of nice old cars and things there, which have come from that part of the world. So, yeah, sort of looking forward to working for my first Cuban station.
Yeah. Well, as I say, I think everybody remembers the Cuba as having lots of big American cars, whereas the bodywork's the big old American cars, but the engines might not be, and that sort of thing. Don't they, Matt?
Yeah. No, Cuba's got a colorful history. Absolutely. I have heard actually Cuban stations, not from the UK, but when I'm down with the family in sort of the southeastern coast of Spain. And, I think looking at what the Cuban stations can achieve, as Leslie mentioned about, just making do and building and kind of that spirit of engineering and innovation and enterprise that they apply to their cars. They are entitled, if you have a first class license in Cuba, to a 2,000 watt station. So, that's a kick in the pants. Right?
That's serious cloud warming.
Oh, I just see my QRP membership go out the window.
I'm reading an article earlier in the year from the ARL website, and Charlie Lima is the prefix for the third class licenses with 10 watts. You've got Charlie Mike prefix for 100 watt stations, and then Charlie Oscar for the full blown up to 2,000 watts. So a 2 kilowatt station, if we get a couple of those on the air, it'll be absolutely fantastic.
Yeah. That's serious cloud warming. I mean, I feel bad going QRO at 100 watts these days, being a normal QRP person, but 2 kilowatts. Wow.
I know one person many years ago tried to go high power. I think he was running 400. And if you know anything about London, it's a high density. Everyone lives in rabbit hutches, and it was not going to work in London. But I tell you what, if they're going to run that amount of power, it certainly will put a cracking signal into the UK from there.
Yeah, certainly will. I knew a G3, unfortunately silent key, who had this aversion to running pretty much full legal power, 400 watts. In the middle of, in the suburbs, and he used to interfere with just about everything within about half a mile radius of his house, and he was told to stop it many a time. And I went round and looked at his coax, and there was arcing in the place. Oh, it was good stuff, but no, we can't talk easy. Unfortunately, he's no longer with us. So.
We got too much health and safety nonsense here to do things like that.
Oh yeah, certainly have. But yeah, his mindset was in a different era where you just did it and that was all right. So, yeah. Oh dear. But there you go. Moving on, our next news story. Ofcom.
I'm still giggling over that one.
You are. Well, never mind. Just say it is a fun one. So, our next news story. Ofcom have got a licensing problem. They've issued some short call signs, and they're asking people to give them back. Matthew, you put this one in. Do you want to comment first?
Yeah, I guess Ofcom gets a tough press, right? We only ever report them when they've done something wrong, or they've shortchanged us in some way. And I had to laugh when the fact they've actually shortened the call signs of some recent license applications. So they've, over the past year or 2 years, I think we've reported over and over about some of the IT issues they've had. This is our national regulator. This is our national registry, which is issuing, globally recognized station calls and so forth. But it seems like they got a glitch in the system yet again. They released some valid 2-letter suffix calls. So, I guess GX 1, 2, that kind of thing, that kind of structure, or AB, I should say. And they slipped out the net. They had them. They were valid. They were on the books, but they issued them rather than the M0, M6 kind of structure of 3 letters, which is fairly standard, I guess. And they've put their hand up. They said, well, we made a mistake. Can we have them back, please? Because they are valid call signs. They would like the recipients to pick up the phone and call back Ofcom Spectrum Licensing, and discuss the potential of getting them replaced with 3-letter suffix call signs. And I think, that's crazy. That's crazy. This is a government department that can say, oh, no, we issued them in error. They're null and void. Don't use them. Please contact us for new calls. But they're not. They're saying, oh, excuse us. Do you mind if we have that back, please? I think it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Well, I suppose if you had QSL cards printed or a website or something with that call sign, and then suddenly you get told, oh, it's not yours anymore, we're taking it away, and then some might get upset. We may have spent money or something on doing that. Whereas, at least if you have a conversation about it, if you have a valid reason, or if it's going to cause you some, particular issue, particular problems by having it taken away, then I guess they may be saying, well, look, we'll consider letting you keep it. I don't know.
Well, there is obviously the reality that if you've just passed your license or you're applying for your first call, you'd kind of know what your call should be.
That's true. Well, I don't know. I mean, I'm not familiar with what the conditions were that caused the error. Whether it was just anybody who gets one of these call signs, or it's just a particular class of license, I don't know.
We can only go by what's in the public domain at the moment, and I know it's for a fact that 2-letter call signs have actually been around for quite a while. My own club, G2HR, Silverthorne Radio Club, and I think other clubs have had 2-letter call signs for a considerable period. The thing is, look, mistakes happen, and I've always sort of believed if you make a mistake, put your hands up and say sorry, we cocked up there, and any kerfuffle will be over in about 10 seconds. Any criticism, it's gone, because people say, look, we're sorry, we shouldn't have issued those. There's a mistake. Trying to do the rest of the stuff, I really don't think works. But that's just my view.
Yeah. Well, as I say, we have G2XP as a club call sign, so I know where you're coming from on those. I thought about 2 or 3 years ago, Ofcom did say they had some short call signs, and they were going to issue them either to clubs or people that were contest groups, because the short call signs would be okay for contesting. But I suppose if somebody had issued a M6AA or M6AB, to use an example, your M6 foundation licence holder would be going, oh, I'll have that, and being quite excited, I would have thought. So,
and okay, so the UK, we don't have a vanity call sign type of process like they have in, say, in the US and other countries, and so there is an element of, let's say, kudos or some. Not bragging rights, but there's a value to our call signs. We all enjoy them, we cherish them, and when you've got something a little different, you want to hold on to it, and you may be quickly going to print your QSL cards, but you kind of have to validate. Did I wasn't expecting this. Why have I got this? So there's as a receiver of the call, I would ask questions. Sure, you're all lucky to find that kind of gift, if you like, but I think the way the Ofcom is handling it is they're kind of asking people to come back to them and retire them for a new one. They should be a bit more, I don't know, man up and say, look, this is an error. Don't use it. Here's your new call.
We all make errors. It's just one of those things.
Oh, yeah, errors happen, but the way that they're trying to correct it seems a little bit parochial rather than being a national or internationally recognized body for call signs.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So anyway, let's hope this gets resolved fairly quickly, and anybody hearing 2-letter call signs in the UK, there are legit ones, there are these new ones which are legitimate as well. So a letter followed by a number followed by 2 letters can be a UK, and you can have G or M followed by a number followed by 2 letters, which will be valid UK call sign. So if you're listening to anybody on HF, please don't ignore them. They might be a contest station, especially if it's G2XP, because that's us.
There are actually 3-letter call signs, aren't they? Like M3, A or something like that.
Yeah.
I totally lost track because many years ago when I took my license was 1980s, early 1980s, and it's changed beyond recognition. I really haven't kept up with that side of things at all. It's just driving me nuts. So if I need to, there's a book, I look it up, but I don't try and keep up on that.
Yeah, I know where you're coming from, Leslie, because every now and again I have to sit down with a fairly new licensed amateur and explain how some of the call signs came about, and I have to explain that why I'm an M1 and Chris and Matthew are an M0, and
yeah, this thing, when I took my license, it was about 8 pages. Now it's about 50. With the explanation notes and the updates and everything else. So there's a copy of it in the corner in case I need to look at it.
Yeah, certainly is, no probs. Okay, moving on. This one was pretty much breaking news yesterday. We have new owners for Practical Wireless and Radio User. Now, Practical Wireless and Radio User are two long-standing magazines in the UK, and I'm sure they get people have them on subscription around the world, so let's hope your subscriptions stay. We've had a little bit of a vested interest in this because I know Matthew's published 2 articles in Practical Wireless, haven't you, Matt?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and this month there's a write-up on the ICQ podcast, so we got 2 pages in there as well. But interestingly, Chris, you put this in. Do you want to run with it?
Yeah, so there's announcements. We came out yesterday on Twitter, and there's an announcement today on the website saying that Practical Wireless and Radio User magazine have now been bought by Warner's Group Publications, who are a Lincolnshire-based multi-million-pound turnover publishing company that specialise in producing magazines, websites, and events for niche hobbies. And reading through the article, there's the kind of press release. So the current owners of PW Publishing that produce Practical Wireless and Radio User, chaps called Roger Hall and Steve Hunt, have decided that it's time for them to, I think they decided to sort of retire. They wanted to find a good long-term home. Practical Wireless has been around since 1932. And he says that Radio User had its roots in the Shortwave magazine, which goes back to 1937. So they've both got very long histories, and obviously they want them to continue to have that. So they've found Warner's, sold those 2 publications to Warner's, and they believe that they will allow it to have a long and fruitful future. So it all sounds good. Apparently, the October issue will be the first issue that Warner's will be producing. Good news is that the existing editors, Don Field of Practical Wireless and George, I think it's Y. Sala, who edits Radio User, will continue to do that. So there's no change in the production at the moment, anyway. So yeah, it's just a new episode, a new chapter in the future for those 2 magazines. Yeah. And just on the question about subscriptions, Martin, it says for the next 3 months that they will continue to manage it through their WebScribe site, and they'll be handing over all details to the new company so that they can continue that. So I'm sure they'll be in touch with those that subscribe to those magazines.
Yeah, and looking at some of the other magazines they produce, I know one of them was a crafting one that the wife used to get every now and again, and that was a really high quality magazine. So I don't think the quality of Practical Wireless will go down based on the new owner, I would suggest.
Yeah, it looks like they've got quite a few hobbies that they cover, as well as a couple of magazines relating to the building and construction world. So yeah, looks like it's a good fit for their to fit into their portfolio of magazines.
Synergies are, I think, the word they use.
There you go. I couldn't.
The management. Yeah, Practical Wireless is a very well respected magazine. What can I say? I mean, I used to read it for years and years and years, and you have an old copy there that was covered in solder splatter, but obviously it's moved on, and it moved on to more commercial gear. The editor changed because we had the previous editor down at my local club many years back, and then it went to Don Field, I believe, and Don's been doing a tremendous job there. So yeah, it's winds have changed for Practical Wireless, I think.
Yeah. And you're talking about Rob Mannion. Rob was
Rob Mannion, that was the name. Yes, yeah, that was the chap that came down.
Yeah, Rob was an interesting character, real nice guy, interesting character. We had him do a talk at our club as well. So, a long time ago. Matthew, being a published editor in Practical Wireless twice, what's your feelings?
So I published a couple of articles over the past, say, 18 months or 24 months on, printing circuit boards, the little homemaking process, and a few other bits and pieces. And I know from a contributor's perspective, it's been always a very straightforward process to come up with an idea, draft an article, submit it, go back and forth with editing, and then fortunately have things published. I've been a subscriber, well, not a subscriber, but I've been taking it monthly. I always go to my local newsagent and request my copy. Since I got into the hobby about 3 or 4 years ago, so I have pretty much all my back copies lined up in a filing cabinet with my QST magazine as well. I think looking at where the publishing company was at that, as of, say, yesterday, PW Publishing, they only had 3 titles, which was PW Magazine, Radio User, and Falconers, which is a completely different topic of birds of prey, I guess, magazine. And I presume, given the sale of the radio magazines now, does that mean Falconers is also being sold, or is perhaps being run down to just a portfolio of one magazine? I don't know. But looking at the new owners, they seem to be dedicated to the kind of magazines that, as was mentioned, are targeted towards niche hobbies. They're always the magazines that I've seen on the newsagent's shelves. So I feel pretty confident that they have experience in this. They have scale, and hopefully they'll let the editorial content and values that the PW magazine brings to the market and to the hobby can be left untouched, because I think they're doing a great job.
Yeah. Well, I've dipped in and out of Practical Wireless for years. I remember I really got sold on it back in the early 70s when I was a mere youngster. But I say, to me, that was then days. It was far more practical on building things. Now it's.
What was the name of that guy, the editor, many years back? Fred. What's his name? Fred. Is it Judd? Many years back,
it might have been
there was
Fred
an
Judd that started it. Yeah.
Sorry, what was his name?
It might have been Fred Judd that started it in the very.
I'm absolutely certain that I've got one of his books knocking about, and I found it in an antiques thing, and it is an absolute gold mine of how to do things.
Yeah.
Oh, it's brilliant, Fred Judd. I'm sure that was his name. And it was an absolute gold mine of how to do things, and it was really good.
Yeah.
So looking on the internet, Fred Judd, G2. Hang on, I've lost him. Where's he gone? G2 BCX.
That's the one.
Call sign.
Any books published by
got the
him?
Wikipedia page as well. Sorry.
Yeah. Any books published by him are well worth picking up. If you spot one by Mr. Judd, pick it up. The illustrations, they're line drawings, they're not photographs, but the illustrations are so clear. He writes very concise, he writes very sensibly, and the other claim to fame was his brother designed the Spitfire.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So, I'll say, his brother designed the Spitfire and he was into radio. So interesting gentleman to look on. We got off topic a little bit here.
That's what we're doing anyway. It's
Yeah,
fine. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But going back to what we were saying, winds of change for Practical Wireless. I really hope and wish them all the well, and I hope it turns out for the better.
I think that goes for all of us, Leslie. So, yeah. Moving on. It says here, cyber threats prompt return of radio for ship navigation. And they've been starting to get a bit worried that ships are totally reliant on GPS. If the GPS system gets blocked for any reason, either by hackers or the American military switch it off because it's really a military system, or somebody jams the signal, a lot of shipping is going to be a little bit out of luck. So they're trying to reinvent the old beacon thing, from what I can understand. Chris, do you want to go first on this one?
Can do, yeah. So it's interesting that I know that aircraft have got various systems for navigation. I believe They do use GPS nowadays, but there's also lots of other navigation beacons on the ground that aircraft can use to navigate. And of course, they all require maintenance and upkeep, which I guess is fairly expensive. From what this article is saying, that there were similar systems in place for maritime, for ships to use, but that's now pretty much gone. And nowadays, ships rely on GPS, so there isn't any backup system anymore to use. So that's so yeah. If there was an issue with GPS, well, according to this article at least, then there'll be a problem because they may have to revert to some very old ways of navigating. Think back to the days of ships with sails. Yeah, when think back to the days when they used to navigate by stars and look at these things like sextants and things. When
doesn't require batteries.
Well, exactly. That may be where they have to go back to if there was an issue with GPS. So, never say never.
Yeah, we get lost and end up in Scotland somewhere.
Remind me, Chris, not to invite you to my pub quiz team.
Not to invite me. Yeah, thanks.
The tool that they used on shipping ages ago. I don't know. Tripods, right? Tripods. No.
Hang on. I also picked up Leslie having a dig at our Scottish.
Yeah.
We're gonna have to apologise.
I always get a mention for Scotland. I always do, and always have done.
There'll be complaints.
Yeah.
We've got that section out, I think.
Yeah. I will send the apology letter, Leslie. Oh dear.
Oh, dear.
So Matt, were you feeling on this one?
Yeah. Well, look, it's in a word, redundancy. Right? There's an issue of redundancy. GPS, we're so dependent upon it, not just cars driving around towns and shipping. And we if you peel back the real users of the technology, you'll find it's probably turning up in the Internet of Things, and your toaster needs to know where it is on the kitchen table or the kitchen counter. And the fact that we're building more and more and more layers of dependency, and we're taking things for granted based on the internet and communication services and the little magic, telephones in your hand which do everything, that it's a target for hacking. Absolutely, spyware.
We are totally relying on these systems, and if they go down, we can't. You look at our work on the train systems, and you look at the NHS, you look at shipping, you look at aircraft. We are totally relying on these systems, and we've got to be able to step back and say, actually, what do we do when these things go down? Yeah. And I think that's where we are now.
Yeah. And just kind of looking a little bit, we did a little bit of Wikipedia checking on what the alternative system is. E-LORAN, or enhanced LORAN is the terminology. It looks to be operating like pulsed signals at a center frequency of about 100 kilohertz. And just reading some of the article information, the pulses are designed to allow receivers to distinguish between ground wave and skywave components in the received composite signal. This way, the E-LORAN signals can be used over very long distances without fading or uncertainty of time of arrival measurements from skyways. So again, finding out where you are based on timing of signals and knowing what the timing signal was is important. E-LORAN is just a two-dimensional mechanism for finding position, so it's not going to help aircraft. But then they already have, I think as Chris was talking about earlier, redundant systems already. So they have alternatives.
Yeah. Well, just talking about GPS and not ships, so I'm going off a tangent here. But I drove from my house down to Frederikshavn, and I drove back. Now, all right, I pretty much knew the route to Dover, done it many times, but we used to be able to buy map books. Nobody wants to sell you a map book now. You've got your GPS. So I come off the ferry in France. I've got to drive across France, across Germany, and I haven't got a map book. And I've got to say, I was a bit worried.
Well, I'll tell you what, Morse, when we went to Germany the previous time, 2 years ago,
yeah,
I did actually go and buy a book. I did actually go and buy a European map, just in case everything else let us down. We had that as a backup.
All right. Well, I didn't get one, and I was pretty much worrying. And it sounds silly. I'm not panicking, but it was in the back of my mind. It's like, I'm out of control here, because I like to look at a map and go, right, I'm going there to there to there to there. Now I might not remember all of it, but I'll have key points on the map, and I like to then just use the GPS for the last 5 miles or so. But I couldn't do it. I had to go all the way via the sat nav, and it took me a different way into Germany compared with the way out. So interesting, I think.
But what'll happen? I mean, there was the story the other day about a young lady that climbed so many sites for radio. I don't know if you remember the story, Martin.
Are you talking about the lovely little Lauren who done the Wayne?
Oh, yeah, that's the one. But the thing is, what that teaches is like fieldcraft skills and reading maps. It's all those really important skills. If you just rely on a piece of electronics and that goes down, well, I guarantee she'll be able to do it.
Yeah. Well, Mrs. Butler doesn't listen that often, so I might get away with it. But the first sat-nav device that I bought literally made my life a lot easier, because it meant I could say to Mrs. Butler, just put the postcode in and the address in, and it will take you there. Because she used to go places, and I used to joke with her that she was lost when she went out the end of the road, but she's not that bad, but in fairness. But it did really free, for somebody who's not very good at navigating, these things really do free up people's lives and enhance them. For somebody who's used to using a map and knows where things are, they worry you when you haven't got the map. That's what I'm saying. But anyway, let's hope this new system gets put in. Lorenz gets put in, because there's always a chance that things will go wrong. So
then we have to go back to pen and paper and know how to do it properly.
Yeah, certainly do. Last news story of this round table, just a nice one to comment on. The Australian Travellers Net. It looks like if you're a radio amateur and you're travelling in Australia, probably in the outback and places like that, there's a couple of frequencies, one on 20 metres, one on 15 metres, and set times where you can pass traffic to just let people know you're okay and one thing and another. What do you think, Matt?
Well, it's fantastic to think how big Australia actually is, and the fact that they're using 20 meters and 15 meters to arrange this. Now, I confess I've never used a net. I've never used VHF, UHF nets or anything on HF. I've usually been a point-to-point contact kind of thing. How do the nets work? What's the process? If I'm a traveler and I want to check in and let my people know that I'm okay, I guess I'm calling out to a particular frequency at a particular time. But what's the process generally for nets?
Protocol, I think, is the word you're looking for.
Thank you. Exactly, protocol.
Yeah, okay, there's two types of nets that I've been involved with. One is club net, where one person controls the net, and it's just like the controller. These type of nets, they're usually set up via on a rotor that somebody will be there, and people will effectively check in and just say they're okay and one thing or another, or they'll pass messages, and the net controller, it's for argument's sake, if you needed to been out of range for a long period of time, you might want to say, just let the wife know I'm okay, just send her an email, let her know I'm okay, I'm at XYZ or whatever, and I'll call her as soon as possible. And they quite happily do that, send an email off for you, or in some cases make a phone call. So I think it's just one person at a time becomes the net controller on a roster and listens for anybody calling in to just let pass messages, if I understand it right.
Yeah, so it's very much in the mold of the original American Radio Relay League's process of cross-country communications, right?
Yeah,
it's one of the earliest forms of usage.
Yeah, I would suggest so. And
I'm thinking the same thing actually, Matt. So that relaying of information is is before we had phones and things. I guess that was a very, very useful way of getting the message out, I suppose. And
was that ever a thing in the UK? Was that ever I mean, it's a small island, but did we ever have that kind of reason or one of the ground tenets of our hobby?
I came into the hobby in 2000, so I've been licensed, 17 years. Leslie's a bit older than me, been licensed a little bit longer than me, but probably not in our time, I would suggest, if at all. What do you think, Leslie?
Well, I think you're going way, way back. I mean, I don't really know. I mean, I know there was... I'm going into historical things that I really don't know much about. I imagine there was quite a lot of military use when it first started, which is why the military were interested in radio amateurs. But yeah, this is sort of going way out of what I know, really.
Yeah, I would suggest that the UK is... It hurts me to say it, but the UK is a very small country. And, you know, considering Australia and the actual size of, we would have potentially even pre-internet or pre-today, we would have probably had a strong network of getting information from A to B. A good postal service, that sort of thing. So
I mean, we look upon a long journey as, say, London to Cornwall. Yeah, you know, and in reality, if you look on a map, that's about the size,
miles.
And you know, it's nothing on a map at all.
It sounds like a subject that people on this particular call don't actually know much about. So I wonder if anybody out there can answer the question for Matt. Was there ever any of that happened in the UK? Or anybody know a little bit more about how radio relay works? I don't think we on this we don't know everything, and I wonder if anybody else can enlighten us.
Yes, please. And I guess the only thing I can think of from a UK perspective is the size of the British Empire may have had, you know, way back when, some sort of relaying between some of the other countries and the UK, or vice versa. Yeah. So if you're listening, please let us know. Drop us a line at icqpodcast.com.
Unfortunately,
be interesting to know.
Yeah, unfortunately, the one gentleman probably could have told you a lot of that, Matt, who was a club member up until about to the beginning of the year, was Ron McDonald, but he became a silent key. But he used to run of the radio relay stations out in the Far East for cable and wireless. And around the UK, there are lots of cables that come in. Some come in. The Isle of Wight has a massive number of cables laid into it, and lots of connectivity with the rest of the Commonwealth came in through the Isle of Wight, I believe. The ends of the cable are still there. They're not live, but there is a little room there where they all came in. But it's a different world, isn't it?
Yeah. Bygone days.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, I think we had a nice little chat about some of these, and I think there was some interesting stuff. So let's find out what everybody else has been up to, because I haven't been up to very much, really. Leslie, apart from cursing and being horizontal and hobbling around on crutches, what else have you been up to radio-wise?
Well, I listened to the thing at Gilwell Park when they had the ISS come over, and that was absolutely thrilling. And I was using an ICOM W2E and a little web antenna, and it came over as clear as a bell. I could not believe it. I mean, Gilwell Park is just down the road from me, and as you know, I just couldn't make it at all. But that was one thing. I have been trying to tidy up the shack, and I've been pottering about on 70 megs as well. So, and I've managed to work out a little programming problem I had on one of the radios, and working shifts. You know what it's like, Martin. I just didn't have the time to work out this particular problem, and I sat down. And I looked at it, and do you know, it took me about all of 5 seconds to work out what I was doing wrong.
Yeah, I know.
But it goes like that. It goes like that sometimes.
Yeah, I wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning with the answer often, mate. You keep a pen and paper beside the bed. But, I know. And I would guess at Gilwell Park, because you're that close, did you hear both sides? Because you'd heard the RSTV.
Yes, I did, yes.
Yeah, whereas I listened the first pass and didn't hear a thing, so I had my scanner.
There was nothing on the first pass. On the second pass, I got both sides on the second pass.
Yeah, I was very disappointed about that because being a shift worker and starting work at stupid o'clock in the morning, I had to give up and go to bed. So never mind.
Yeah, sleep's a bit essential. Yeah. I know all about shift work, Martin.
Yeah, you do, true. Matt, what have you been up to? You've been globetrotting. You've been down to Spain a few times. Have you got a shack set up down there yet?
I don't. I have been toying with the idea of an Echo Alpha call sign. I'm just a bit worried about the language barrier. My Spanish is terrible, just enough for my mother-in-law and the local supermarket. But yeah, you're right. Work and family commitments have kind of gotten in the way of podcasts and gotten in the way of other activities on the radio. But I have done a few things. I've invested in my first UHF VHF 50-watt mobile rig. So I now have what I would call my shack, which is on my desk for local, VHF UHF. It's a Kenwood TM-V71, and did a little bit of research and got a good deal on it. And I'm very, very happy. And that works then when I play radio and I put my 8-meter push-up mast in the backyard. I stick a Diamond X50 white stick collinear on the top and work the world as far as the M25 going around London anyway. In HF, I've been playing with a little bit of 20 meters, just as and when, putting up a little dipole in the backyard and just listening out and playing. Conditions aren't fantastic. In fact, they're not even really good. So that's somewhat of a limiting activity. I've committed myself to learning Morse more than usual. I should caveat that. I have signed up to the Essex CW Amateur Radio Club's Morse Code Bootcamp, which is coming up in October. I'm taking the plunge to go and sit down with some like-minded, more experienced souls and learning the code or putting it into practice and maybe going on the air for the first time. And in that spirit, I've been practicing and just doing a bit more homework, as it were, as and when I can. I invested in invested is not the right word. I've always been curious about Vibroplex bugs, the semi-automatic keys. And I had a look on a well-known auction website and found a good deal from the States for $50. And got it shipped over, and it was a 1964 model, judging by the serial numbers, but cleaned up really, really well. Very, very well cleaned up. Very pleased with it.
That's as old as me.
So there's still life in the old springs yet. Let's put it that way. And
that's a nice way of talking about Leslie.
I bet that's in better mechanical condition than me.
The best way to clean it is I stripped it right down. It's got chromed parts, obviously. It's a chromed metal framework and bits and pieces. I put it in white vinegar, simple white vinegar with a little bit of table salt. Let it stew for a couple of hours. Pull it out and wipe away any of the rust or the little specks of black that you accumulate with time. Washed away pretty quickly. I also have a motorcycle with a bit of chrome on it, so I also have some Autosol, this sort of metal polish that's pretty popular, and I use that as well. It cleaned up really well. First time using it, bit of a challenge. It's not a traditional key in any sense that I've ever used. But having said that, once you get the weighting correct, and the weighting can be slowed down to 20 words or 18 words per minute, or put more weight on the end of these of the Vibroplex sprung arm, and it's surprising. There's a tactile feel. There's like a playback or a pushback or feedback when you use the Vibroplex. It kind of informs you when that next dot's coming up, and so you can build rhythm and timing. I've never experienced that beyond electronic keyers, paddles, which where the radio or the rig or the keyer does the automatic dits and dahs for you. You can be pretty slack in your timing of your keys, your dits and your dahs left and right, because the keyer will always deliver the exact appropriate timing and spacing. The Vibroplex doesn't afford that kind of luxury. And so learning to really catch the transitions from multiple dits to a DAW, I don't get it right, a DAW, or vice versa, takes a bit of practice, but I'm really enjoying it. So I don't know if Dan Romanchik is listening out, but I think he's also played with bugs before, so I'm trying to follow in your footsteps.
Yeah, sounds good to me. Sounds good to me on that one. Well, Chris, what have you been up to?
Well, I finally got the radio in the Volvo. Last time I think I was on the podcast, I was having trouble getting the head unit to stay in place. I've now hopefully got that sorted out, so that's better. I also listened to the ISS contact, and amazingly, from here in Surrey, which is probably a good 20 or 30 miles away from Gilwell Park, and I actually managed to hear both sides of the conversation as well. And I actually recorded the pass on my PhoneCube dongle, so I actually recorded not the audio but the I and the Q did, so you can actually watch it. In fact, on Monday night, Martin, you weren't around. I think you got early, but I did actually play it back, and you can see quite clearly as the ISS passes over the frequency changing. It changes from a high frequency and it goes down by quite a few kilohertz. So that's quite interesting to see. So you sort of hear both sides of the conversation and see every time the astronaut came back, it was on a slightly lower frequency. So that was quite interesting. Other things, I also managed to work the station as well on 80 meters, so GB17 Yota. Managed to get that in my log, only on the one band, so it wasn't enough to get the award. I think you had to work on 3 bands to get the award. But anyway, glad to work them anyway. It's good to get them the course in their log. And coming up, we've got SSB Field Day coming up at the start of September, so we're just starting planning for that. Just making sure who's bringing what, and we'll be on the air for that one. So been reasonably busy over the last few weeks.
Yeah. Well, you guys have been busy on radio work. I mean, I'm still sort of contracting and working really silly hours at the moment. So that's my excuse, and unfortunately I'm sticking to it. But the other thing is, we're now back on a normal release schedule. For the last 4 weeks, or this will be the 5th week in a row, we've released an ICQ podcast. And I've said to Colin, if you think about it, ever want to do this weekly, then it's a full-time job for somebody. And seeing as we don't make any money out of it, it ain't going to happen. But it takes a phenomenal amount of work to get one of these out every week. And thoroughly enjoyed what we did. We went to Gilwell Park, as I say. Last episode you would have heard that, and it went very, very well. Got a little bit of a problem at home I've got to sort out. I've got an active antenna on a shortwave receiver, and it's as deaf as old boots, so I don't know why it's gone deaf. However, when you switch the power on to it, you hear the noise level come up, so the amplifier's working. It's just as if the antenna's open circuit, so I've got to get up on the roof and have a look and see what's happened there. But
any relays in it, Martin?
Don't believe so, because it's a straight active antenna. It's not not for transmitting, is it? So I made it a long time ago. I've just got to go and have a look at it. Can't work out why, but it does fire up, because when you put power on it, the background noise raises. So I know the amplifier in it is working, but it doesn't seem to receive anything at the moment. And lastly, been involved a little bit on Wires X via GB3XP, usually around 9 o'clock in the morning local time, so that'll be about 8 UTC. I'm often on my way home from work or just after that for the first half of my shift. So I had some interesting contacts. Worked with a gentleman in Japan, a gentleman in Russia, all over Europe, and often all over the UK on my way home. So that's about all I've done radio-wise, which is not very exciting, is it?
It's not too bad, Martin.
Well, I try, but I'd like to do more. Is I think the thing is,
we can only do what you can with the shift work. It's just one of those things.
Yeah, and we've had the builders in, so and he was supposed to only be here like 8 days, and he's been here a month. So I think my missus makes him too many cups of tea.
With that, I'm going to go back to my cup of tea and nice biscuits.
Yeah, you have your cup of tea. So anyway, I'd like to thank Mr. Leslie Butterfield G0CIB for joining me tonight.
Been a pleasure, Martin, as always.
Yeah, thanks, Leslie. Mr. Matthew Nassau, M0NJX.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Matt, for coming. And Mr. Chris Howard, M0TCH.
Yeah, cheers, guys. It's been fun as usual.
Yeah. 73 all.
Cheerio.
Keep your amateur ham radio podcast advert free by donating less than a length of coax. Visit www.icqpodcast.com/donate now. For all the news, links and information, visit www.icqpodcast.com.
And now it's time to have a look at the news in brief with me, Colin M6BOY. And we start off with news in the UK that the BBC is going to be switching off AM local radio transmitters. This will affect the areas of BBC Radio Sussex, Surrey, Humberside, Wiltshire, Nottinghamshire, Kent and Lincolnshire that will no longer broadcast on medium wave from 2018. There will also be reduced coverage from BBC Devon, Lancashire and Essex. This is part of the BBC's plan of delivering quality first programming and is based on a trial switch-off that they've been experimenting with since 2011. Of the trial switch-offs that they did, the only area which caused any public reaction was the area of Merseyside, where BBC Radio Merseyside signal was widely listened to on AM and was reinstated. So as always, guys, if this is a service that you enjoy and want to use going forward, probably best to give BBC a shout very quickly and let them know that these services matter to you. The ARRL has released some new posters to help promote amateur ham radio, particularly to younger people, based upon the 2017 National Scouting Jamboree. The posters cover 6 themes, all based around ham radio and covers the themes of adventure, discovery, friendship, out of this world, ready, and the game. Posters measuring 11 inch by 17 inches are available for a download from the ARRL website, which we'll put a link from the ICQpodcast.com website. We've also got a notification of a new Android app, Morse Code Trainer 20 words per minute, which is designed to teach people how to learn and recognize Morse code at 20 words per minute and not just memorize the dits and dars at 5 words per minute. The app will train you to copy Morse code at this 20 word per minute speed using an approach very similar to the Koch method. So we'll put links to that on the ICQ podcast website for you to download the app and certainly have a look, see if it might help you out with your Morse code learning. Well, now we head over to our features episode, which is a feature, double features episode. It's on the FT8 by Bill Barnes, November 3, Juliet India X-Ray, and also our interview with Essex Hams, Pete Stipple. So as always, guys, hope you enjoy.
And now what you've all been waiting for, this episode's feature from the ICQ podcast.
Hey Bill, I'm using a new mode called FT8. Have you heard about it? Hey Bill, I've been working on a lot of stations on a new mode that just came out called FT8. Have you done any work with it? Hey Bill. In this feature, I want to talk about the new mode FT8, which has generated quite a bit of buzz. I've gotten multiple emails and a couple people give me a call and stuff asking about it. But basically, it's a new mode that was just recently added to WSJT-X version 1.8. Right now it's in release candidate 1. They're soon going to have a release candidate 2 from following the developers list. But basically this is a new mode added. It was developed by K9AN and K1JT. The new mode is called FT8, which stands for Frankie and Taylor 8 FSK modulation. So what's unique about this mode is the FT8 uses 15-second transmit-receive sequences, provides 50% or better decoding probability down to minus 20 dB on the channel, and maintains good performance on Doppler spread fading channels. Because it's 15-second transmit-receive cycles, it does have to do an auto-sequencing because it's really not quick unless you're very, very, very quick on the mouse to do it by hand. FT8 QSOs are 4 times faster than those made with JT65 or JT9, and it's a excellent mode for HFDXing and for situations like multi-hop sporadic E on 6 meters. which I actually got a 6-meter QSO further than I expected. I'm not exactly sure if it was sporadic E, but it was definitely had to do with something with FT8. So, in characteristics of FT8, as I go over this quick, the transmit and receive sequence I said is 15 seconds. The message length is 75 bits plus 12 bits of CRC, that's your error checking. It uses an FEC code of LDPC 17487. I actually don't know what that means, but I do know what the modulation means. It's 8 FSK tones spaced 6.25 hertz apart. Therefore, your occupied bandwidth ends up being right around 50 hertz, and the actual transmission duration is 12.64 seconds out of the 15. So transmission ends at 12.64 seconds after it starts, and it turns around. The computer has to decode that really quick, and so you end up getting only about a second or two to decide if you want to work that station or not. So the good news is you can just double click and it will do the rest of the work as long as you have the check marks checked, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. And there's a lot of information out on the internet right now. I've been getting most of my information about it from a FT8 Facebook group run by Jim N2ADV. He's had a lot of really good notes and videos and stuff to get you started. So let's step back before I talk about some other stuff with this and just talk about the exchange. So these are minimally valid QSOs. So basically a station calls CQ and lists their grid square. You respond to that station with their call sign, your call sign, and your grid square. And then when the sequence steps through and it says, okay, your call sign, my call sign, signal report in dBm. So it's, for instance, I get a lot of -4s and -7s and that kind of stuff. And then my station responds back, their call sign, my call sign, R for Roger, dash, and then the signal report. So I've actually worked some stations, R -17. Pretty weak signal. Likewise, I've worked R+6, which is probably the strongest one I've worked so far. And then they respond back, my call sign, their call sign, RRR for Roger, 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 meaning I got it. And then I send their call sign, my call sign, 7 3s, and then they send 7 3s. This basically walks you through the whole QSO sequence so you understand what you're seeing on the screen. I've been giving out some tips to people that are using the WSJTX setup for FT8. Number one is on the main screen, there's a box called Auto SEQ. That stands for Auto Sequence. Unless you're really quick on the mouse, I just click that box and just let it finish working through the stations for me. Another button I always tell people to check is the Call First button on the main screen. This allows that when you're calling CQ, it will automatically reply to the first station that it hears, which is pretty handy if you got a few stations calling in. First one it decodes, it'll respond to them and work them. Another one I check by default, except I'll explain this, is lock TX equals RX. So normally you're going to want to work your transmit and receive on the same frequency so that when you're working somebody, they transmit, you transmit. However, I have had to work a few stations split. And so basically what I did is I would set my transmit to one frequency, my receive to the station calling frequency, so that I'd be nearby. So for instance, they might have 1500 hertz as their transmit, and I pick something like 1650 just to move up the band a little bit. And I was able to work some stations that had lots of callers that way because I was on a free and clear channel. They were able to decode me first and got worked. Inside the settings, I also recommend people, when you go into the preferences settings inside WSJTX, under the behavior, make sure you check the double click on call sets TX enable. This saves from double-clicking on a call and then hitting TX enable, which is some people can do that. I couldn't get the mouse fast enough, and then they would be starting to transmit already. And the other thing I always check is I call it the anti-lid switch. Disable transmit after sending 73s. After you send your 73s, if you're calling CQ, you want it to call CQ again. If you're just hunting stations, you want to make sure that's checked so that you don't start calling CQ on top of somebody else. Kind of rude. Above that box in the preferences, there's 4 boxes on display. I recommend everybody just check all of them. Blank line between decoding periods just puts a line in the screen so you know that 15 seconds have passed and here's what you just decoded. I like to still see distances in miles. That's up your preference. I put my transmit messages in the RX frequency window because that's handy for when I'm working split to make sure that I'm actually sending the right information. And I always like to show the DXCC entity and work before status. So that's just some tips I've been sharing with other folks as we talk about FT8. And I want to encourage you to go download WSJTX 1.8. Like I said, it's RC1 now. RC2 is going to have a neat feature coming up. I saw in the commit release notes of the development that they're going to have an alt click, which it will only move your RX frequencies. And so it's basically like a quick shortcut that they're going to put in it for working split. And likewise, I think you're going to find there's a lot of information on the internet actively being developed right now. There's a very, very busy Facebook group, an FT8 Facebook group run by Jim N2ADV. And I encourage anyone that wants to work the mode, just, jump on that list and just on the Facebook and check it out. The last note I have here to share with you, with all the WSJT modes, including FT8, make sure you got your time sync with your PC. I actually use the network time protocol daemon on my machine. I have it set to go out on the internet and check 3 to 4 different servers and make sure my time is set, because this is very time based. A lot of problems that people seem to be running into boils down to the clock is a few seconds off. It matters. It matters a lot. So if you go up to WSJTX, make sure you're synchronizing your time frequently throughout the day with the automatic program. And there's a lot of, on the Facebook group, there's a lot of people sharing various ones that they're using. And I'm just using the open source network time protocol daemon on my machine. And it works very well. I also mentioned this is a multi-platform, so it works on Windows, Macintosh, and of course the Linux, which is what I usually use. So I just wanted to share that with everybody today, a little feature. And I hope you'll get on the mode, and I hope you'll give her a try, and I hope you'll have more enjoyment with amateur radio. 7-3, this is Bill, N3JIX.
I'm with Pete Sipple from Essex Hams. Hi Pete, nice to meet you.
Hello there Martin, very nice to meet you.
Yeah, we've had a few chats, but we're always like missing ships in the night, where you're a busy man, I'm a busy man, and we've threatened to do this interview so many times, and we've actually nailed each other's feet to the floor, I think.
Absolutely, we've both got our microphones, so we can chat away to each other.
Yeah, so you're here at the YOTA 7 2017. You've been up here with TX Factor, but you do a number of other things. What else have you been up to recently?
Oh, I dive into anything I can. So TX Factor's been here filming what's going on here at the YOTA event. But I'm also probably most well known for Essex Ham, which is started life as a website in Essex, and it's kind of grown into a bit of a monster of a club.
It certainly has, and well, we've seen how you've grown, and you have some really good stuff on your website, so there's lots of useful information there for people. But I'll say the last one recently, there was lots of interest over your document on training, wasn't there?
Oh yes, that got a fair amount of controversy. So there were, as has been discussed in ICQ, there's been all sorts of plans to change the syllabus. The document that came out was 84 pages. It's a lot to digest. So I did the 3 or 4 page summary, and wow, did I get an awful lot of feedback off the back of that.
Yeah, I'm sure you did. I'm sure you did. But as I say, it's interesting, and I think changes have been made now and certain things are going to improve. But I know that couple of things you've done in the past, and I keep asking you where the lovely Kelly is, and you keep saying she's not with me today. So where is she?
Well, there's a long story behind that. Kelly and I have known each other for many years. We used to work together on a tech podcast called Frequency Cast. And Kelly was challenged as part of that show to take up her amateur radio licence. So she did, and we've got a great radio piece for that. But she's not as active as we'd like. She does go on air whenever we can get her on air, but not that often. But she's very good at helping out with certainly events like this. Last year she was very active with our JOTA event in Essex. She's very good with youngsters and encouraging other people to get on. And of course she's done some work on the RSGB video. So she is great, but unfortunately she's a busy lass. She works up in London most of the time. She's got a young family, so getting her out to events like this, we can't quite manage it as often as we'd like.
Yeah, that's understandable. And as I say, I'm really pleased with what she has done for the hobby. And as I say, I know she exists because I've heard her on Frequency Cast, and I've seen the videos on RSGB video. And also, one of our presenters, Edmund Spicer, he was actually interviewed by you guys, I think, a good few years ago. And there's a picture of him and Kelly at Kempton.
That's right. It was about 3 or 4 years ago now. We bumped into Edmund there. He saw the Essex Ham T-shirts and came over and said, oh, I've heard of you. And he's great. I know he's obviously part of ICQ, so he hopefully won't be too embarrassed by me saying this, but there are 2-metre activity events that take place in Essex, and he drives up to some beacon hill somewhere in Sussex or Kent to talk to us. And he follows what we do on the Essex Ham website. If we're doing a special event, he's normally in the log. He'll normally make the effort to get in the log. He's great. More people like that in amateur radio would be great, that are willing to put in the effort and take part in the hobby as much as they can. So well done to Edmund.
Yeah, well, I'm sure Edmund will like that, and I'd say it's great. Now, Essex Hams, you say it was started off as a website, became a club, and it's probably the most progressive group of people in Essex on amateur radio, I suggest.
It's a bit of an odd journey. I joined the hobby in 2010. I was the youngest person at our amateur radio club, and for me, I found something was missing. I thought this is a great hobby. It's something I can really throw myself into, but nobody seems to know about it. It's this hidden hobby, and those that do know about it are thinking Tony Hancock. They're not realising that this is a modern technical hobby that has a lot of interest. So I basically built a few web pages just to say what amateur radio was, and over time they've grown and grown and grown into this sort of beast that's now, I think we're at 1,500 pages. We've got a forum, lots of a lot of following there, and it linked in with a net I started running, which is a newbie net that became the Monday Night Net, which is now an on-air focus on the local repeater in Essex. And over time things have grown and grown and grown. We got RSGB Club accreditation a couple of years ago, and kind of by mistake we won the Club of the Year for Region 12. And considering we were a web page when we started, to being a sort of a fully formed club, and now of course we're active in the training world. So, it wasn't a planned journey, but people have come along and said, can we do this, can we do that? And we're open to anything. We don't have a heavy sort of committee that stops us doing that kind of progressive stuff. So, the more we can do, the better.
Yeah, as I say, that's really great. And I remember coming along a couple of years ago to an event you did on Marconi Day at the mill there. And that was a really, really enjoyable day out. I assume you do it most years there, but that was certainly something I enjoyed.
Yeah, that was the Chelmsford Amateur Radio Society ran that event. They've got some very good inns with the Marconi Mill, and obviously Chelmsford being the home of radio, they do an awful lot of stuff there. So that would be a Chelmsford Amateur Radio Club event. And interestingly, we had the 95th anniversary of 2MT Writtle, and they did some operating from there. And one of the members, Jim 2E0RMI, set up an internet radio station. He did a 2-day special event internet station just focusing on those early days of 2MT Writtle. And that was really good, getting some of the early stories of the birth of broadcasting, back in the 1920s.
Yeah, sounds interesting. So a lot of what you're going on. Now, going forward, I know that you're heavily involved in training, far more than I am, and I've probably got a bit lapsed recently, but you're doing online learning, aren't you?
And interestingly, before we started the tape today, we were talking about Train the Trainers, and something that came up at the Train the Trainer session I went to is that people learn in different ways. And I don't know about the clubs that you're involved in, but a lot of the clubs in my neck of the woods put up slides and stand there and kind of repeat what's on the slides, maybe add a little bit of colour to it, answer some questions. But not everyone can learn from sitting there staring at PowerPoint. Also, people can't learn from looking through the book. So the idea of the online learning was to cover this, people learning in different ways. So what we do is an online course that is a mix of videos and text. So you can watch a video and take some multiple choice test questions at the end, or step through page by page. And we teach the entire foundation syllabus at people's own leisure, so you don't have to sit dedicated time to do it. It works very well in parallel with clubs training. So the traditional sort of 4 or 6 week training course, you can then go home. If you didn't understand something, watch the video, which is basically a lecture repeated, take a few test questions, and at the end of it you sit a mock, which will give you a feel for whether you'd actually pass the foundation exam or not. And that has really taken off. We didn't expect anywhere near the volume of people that have taken it up. At the moment, for instance, we've got 75 people midway through a course. We've just finished our July course, which had 42. We're now in the August course, which has got 30-something. So we're constantly training about 60 people in foundation, and that's pretty serious numbers.
That certainly is, and far more than we do as a club. And I know what you mean about the PowerPoint slides, and I'm guilty of the PowerPoint slides. However, and Chris gets really annoyed me, Chris Howard, doesn't he? I've left a lot of spelling mistakes in. And the reason I leave them in is because it wakes people up. They go, they'll go, here, there's a spelling mistake on that. And when you're trying to keep a class involved and use any technique you can, I get guilty of using stories and telling people about funny stories about some of the things they're going to do, and that hopefully keeps them awake. So anything you can do to keep people going, I think is great.
Absolutely, and don't get me wrong, I teach with slides to a classroom as well, and again, you've got to keep their attention. You've got to keep your eyes scanning the class. Are people nodding off? Are people blanking? Are people not getting it? And then wake them up a bit if they're not quite getting something. So you use all the tricks at your disposal, and that's the beauty of online, is some people do feel more comfortable maybe asking a question by email rather than putting up their hand in a classroom environment. Also, what we found is people that suffer from particularly dyslexia don't learn well from a book or from reading words off a slide. So a lot of our videos are very sort of hands-on. I draw the Ohm's law triangle, and the video shows a thumb going over the V, explaining I times R, and that works for people that don't get it in a classroom or can't take it in from reading in a book. So people learn in different ways, and if we can put out tools that help, that are either used by individuals or by clubs, great.
Yeah, well, I'd say that's good. And you talk about the triangles. Interestingly, I was talking to a builder the other day, and I showed him the two triangles, and I showed him the power one, and he said, oh, that's clever. And I went, no, it's not, it's basic. And I was showing him how to work out how to put the right value fuse in a device. So there's lots of practical reasons, and I think, and I've probably told this story before, but I taught a person who's unfortunately a silent key now. And the first day I met him, he said to me, I had to teach him at his house because he was very seriously ill. And he said to me, Martin, don't bother to try and teach me maths. I don't know maths. I'm absolutely rubbish at maths. Don't bother. And I went, okay, Alan, I'll tell you what, I'll give you two £5 notes and you give me a £20 note. And he said, go forth and multiply. And I said, so you do maths then? And he said, what do you mean? I said, you have a reason to do it. And if people don't have a reason for using the maths, why would they want to learn it?
Absolutely. And you've got to find that connection with any student. If they're really not getting it, you simplify it. There's so many ways of explaining Ohm's law. Some people will get it, particularly academics. You can just draw up the formula and they'll get it. Other people, you do exactly have to do that. And so many people learn in so many different ways, and we've got so many new people coming into the hobby. Particularly, we see people that haven't sat an exam for maybe 40, 50 years, and they're frightened of it. And you can just simply say, well, there's only 2 questions maximum on formulas. If you really can't get it, just concentrate on getting 24 out of 26. And once they're of that mind, they'll then relax. not stress, and they'll be able to get the other 2 formula questions because it doesn't matter anymore. While the pressure's off, they'll take it in a bit more. So swings and roundabouts.
Yeah, I'd say it's a bit like learning Morse, isn't it? There's a lot of people doing Morse now that didn't want to come into the hobby because Morse was the reason they didn't come into the hobby. Now they're doing it because they don't have to do it and they're enjoying it. So lots of things. So going forward, any plans to do the intermediate as an online learning?
It is a thought. At the moment, the big focus is on working out how we would deliver a revised syllabus. So all the videos and all the text have obviously been geared towards the current syllabus. If that is set to change, we're going to need to rethink the online foundation course. Yes, there is a gap for intermediate. We know Steve, G0FUW, does the Bath online for advanced. So there is a gap for intermediate. No one is doing it. It's something we've looked at. The problem with intermediate for us is so much of it is hands-on and practical that it kind of works as it is because people learn on the way. So you can teach them resistor colour code and then they will sit there with a resistor and measure it with a multimeter. Very hard to do that online, where you've effectively got to stop and say, right, now watch this video and this is how a resistor works, and then resume the online stuff, and then flip to soldering. Right, pause now go and watch a video, this is a soldering iron, this is how you make a joint. And the flow is odd. And really, I think intermediate does work better in the classroom because there's not that much learning and there's a lot of practical. They'll have to do the practicals anyway. So maybe one day, but at the moment, trying to find a way of making it work really well. I don't want to do it, half-heartedly and it not work. So we've paused at foundation. And really, being totally honest, it's getting people into the hobby. So let's put all our effort into getting people in at foundation. If people want to do intermediate, they'll gravitate that way anyway, and clubs can help them.
Yeah. Well, I'll say I enjoy teaching the intermediate most. I think it's the most fun course to teach. You have to teach it, but that's good. So, Pete, the usual questions coming to the end. Website for people to get hold of you.
Okay, we're all over the internet with a bit of luck. The main website is www.essexham.co.uk. We're also on Twitter. We're also on Facebook. We're on LinkedIn. We're on Pinterest, which is a bit daft because only I think 2 people follow us on there. Google Plus and Instagram. So we're everywhere we can be. And also we do occasionally release some videos up on YouTube. So you'll find us if you look for us. But we are tucked away in the corner of Essex.
Yeah, sounds good to me. And as I say, thanks very much for your time, Pete.
Nice to be here, lovely weather, and I gather there's quite a nice collection of refreshments here in Gilwell Park as well.
Yeah, it's great. And as Pete's just said, we're outside in the sun. So thanks very much, Pete.
For all the news, links and information, visit www.icqpodcast.com.
Well, everyone, one of the things that always lightens our week is when we receive mails and feedback from our listeners. So we're very grateful for a couple of pieces of feedback we've had in over the last couple of weeks since our last full episode. So we've got an email here from Lloyd Brown, KC7 November Golf Bravo, and he's picked up on the fact that the guys on the News Roundtable have been talking about working satellites for a number of times on the podcast, and he suggests we have a look at the SatNogs project. That's Sierra Alpha Tango November Oscar Golf Sierra project. They've got designs for 2-axis antenna rotators as well as 2 meter and 77 directional antennas, all built using commonly available parts and some 3D printed ones. And there's also a platform, software platform as well if you're setting up a station. So this is picking up, Dad, isn't it? Because added to that as well, that AMSAT also tweeted us the other day as well to say, we keep hearing you guys talking about working satellites. I think we might have to plan doing something there.
I think we will. And it's something that we really want to do, the guys and I. So I've started looking, I'm starting to do the background work of what I need to do. And the trouble is, lots of things I want to do, but this is also an important one. So I've now committed to do this on a reasonable time scale. So yeah, I think we'll give this a shot. It'll be fun.
Yeah, exactly. Well, so I'm in London next weekend, so maybe we'll have an editorial meeting to decide how we're going to do this. So we'll pick that up from there. Emailing as well from Norway, from Frode England. I hope I pronounced that correct for you. Call sign Lima Alpha 6 Victor Quebec, and also holds the call sign November 2 Victor Quebec as well. He thanks us for an interesting podcast. Listen to episode 244, so two bits of feedback there on the last full episode on the topic of the SEPTA license and the HARC international differences, a number of questions. Makes comments. Obviously, we picked up that there's only 28 questions on a Norwegian license and mainly multiple choice. However, he does single out for us how this is actually in line with other examinations around the world, and particularly the textbooks which he's helped to translate into Norwegian do follow those of the RSGB International Amateur Ham Radio Examination Manual. So it looks like, even though, as I say, maybe sometimes on the face of it, you look at the fact that it's a shorter exam, it certainly is on the same syllabus sheet as well from there. So quite a great long email there, just explaining that, as I say, that it is very relevant. So I suppose anyone thinking of getting a full license very quickly by jumping to Norway and answering 28 questions, that's certainly not the case, that is it? Because it's certainly taught and educated along the very same way. 3 hour blocks, 12 evenings, of course, that's 40 hours worth of training. So there's certainly no cheap and easy way of getting a full license in Norway, is there?
No. And let's be brutally honest about it. Every country that meets the SEP requirement for a license, every country that's in the SEP agreement meets a SEP requirement. Now, whether that's X questions or Y questions is immaterial. You can only do what that country has decided. I'm not suggesting any country is easier than any other. It looks at the moment that I think the UK is one of either the only one or one of very few that has practical assessments. However, that is not a licensing requirement of our regulator. That's more a matter of the fact that our society runs the examinations, and they've chosen to do it that way. Now, in fairness, you can only sit the exam for the country you're doing, and you can only sit the type of exam that country is offering. So, in fairness, we're all radio amateurs. This was not a pot with any particular country. I just thought it was an interesting story to say, there are different numbers of questions in different countries, and equally, the less questions you have to answer, the more difficult I assume it could be, because if you've got the same syllabus but they're only going to ask you a few questions, if they're the questions you're not particularly clued up on, it could make life very difficult for you, couldn't it, Colin?
Exactly, and I suppose there's also this societal thing as well, isn't there? In fact, when you look at, I know the UK and Ireland here just had their education exams released. There's always this thing every year, it's easier. And I wonder sometimes if there's this idea when people look at the differences between the examinations between different countries, is this whole thing of, it must have been harder in my day when I did it was harder for me, sort of thing. Rather than realising that obviously everything changes along the way, and the way we teach is different, etc. So potentially having a 28 question examination doesn't make it easier, as you say. If 14 of those questions are things you're not very good on, you're going to struggle to get past 50%. And it doesn't matter if that's 70 questions, 100 questions, whatever it be. If 50% you're going to struggle on for some reason, it's still going to be a problem for you. So no, look, as you say, it's in line, and thank you very much, Fred, for let's say the information, the background you gave us there. I think that's certainly, though, in line with our thoughts on that there. But across the board, the main thing is to get people interested in the hobby. And if in Norway they're offering sort of 40 hours of tuition to people to get them onto the hobby, obviously they're bringing online for us lots of well-trained amateurs, if you like, to hopefully then enjoy the hobby and as I say, become part of it. So continue the good work, guys, over there in Norway. Well, what have we got coming up now? We've got Newark Hamfest coming up in about just over a month now. I think that's there on the 30th of September and the 1st of October, if I remember right. Sorry, no, 29th and 30th of September is the Newark Hamfest. We'll be there, Martin and myself. I think also Martin Rothwell, Chris Howard, and I think Edmund Spicer will be there, if I remember rightly as well, of the team with us for the Newark event. So again, guys, orange polo shirts will be on. Feel free to come and say hello, tell us what you think of the show, give us any feedback you want, etc. You're more than willing to catch up with us and let us know what you think. As always, we would like to thank our feature contributors to this episode, Pete Stipple, Mike Zero, Papa Sierra X-Ray, and Bill Barnes, November 3, Juliet India X-Ray. Hope you guys enjoyed their features. Catch us as you always can. Visit us on the website, icqpodcast.com. And if you haven't done so already, either sign up for the e-newsletter for the latest news information from the website or drop us a donation. That's always very, very handy. We would also like you to consider joining the Facebook group and Twitter as well, and also our personal LinkedIn profiles. You can find those as well. In relation to getting the show as well, guys, we've had a problem in the last week with the RSS feed through Google's feed burner stopping working. It's now working again. However, we would like you to consider using the official RSS feed for the show, and you can check that out by going to the ICQ Podcast website. Click on download the show, and there's the official RSS feed there. If you could update your podcast catchers to find out that feed, that'd be much appreciated. Well, that just about wraps up our show. We're doing this part early in the morning, so I'm sure Mrs. B is still asleep, but you're going to need to think about making her a nice morning cup of tea to wake her from her slumber.
I certainly will in a second. I'll get her up, have a bit of fun. Wake her up. She's not the best when she's been woken up. But I'd like to thank Mr. Leslie Butterfield G0CIB, Mr. Matthew Saw, M0NJX, and Chris Howard, M0TCH or N4CTH, for their involvement in the News Roundtable. Great fun as always. And I think it went very well. But don't forget the newsletter, Colin.
Exactly. So as I say, we'll keep publishing it every couple of fortnight, and as I say, look, that wraps up the show for us. So thanks guys for listening as always, and I wish you all 73s and enjoy the hobby over the next fortnight.
Yeah, 73s, and we'll do it all again in a fortnight's time.